What does a gin and tonic and a roast prime rib of beef have in common? Absolutely nothing. This is such a simple thing to cook, it's going to cook itself. Kind of looks like the butcher had a cocktail too, though. So it's the holidays, and there's so many different things that you can make to impress the family and the friends that are coming over. But what's the one thing that probably everybody thinks about? Nope, it's not a pork roast, you know, crown roast of pork. It's not a rack of lamb. It's not a turkey, because we just had one. It is a prime rib roast. Everybody, for the most part, loves a prime rib roast. I know, I do too. But what's the one thing everybody secondly thinks about? Oh my God, I don't want to screw it up. There's plenty of things that can be screwed up for your holiday dinner. This doesn't have to be one of them. Of all those selections and all the things that can be made for a holiday dinner, this here is probably the simplest thing to make. And I'm going to show you how to do it in such a way that I guarantee it's going to come out perfectly, and you're going to be like, I can't believe this was like so easy. Prime rib is a term that was used way before the USDA came about. So everybody used to call about prime rib because it's like the prime cut of the cow. We're not talking about the Chateaubriand filet, but as far as anything other than that is concerned, we're talking about the prime piece, the most prized piece of the beef. So they called it the prime beef, right? Then the USDA came in and started giving the grading system, and they decided to call it prime beef because of the marbling content and yada, yada, yada. And then it got a little fuzzy. But push all that aside and just remember this. Prime rib is this cut. It can be a prime cut, meaning it's much more money and it's got a lot more marbling, or it can be a USDA choice, which is what you pretty much find everywhere. This is a choice. So I think a choice or a prime, whichever one, doesn't really make too much difference. You're still gonna get a really fantastic, flavorful prime rib from either the prime or the choice, because it depends on how you cook it. What I wanna show you is, this is, believe it or not, about an 8-pounder. This one, though, has 3 ribs. And why is that important? Well, as a rule of thumb, if you're gonna have, say, 6 people for dinner, then you want a 3-rib roast. If you're gonna have 8 people for dinner, then you want a 4-rib roast. If you're gonna have 10 people for dinner, then you want a 5-rib roast. Do we roast it with the ribs or not? Basically, the bones give the meat some insulation to protect from overcooking. So at the end of the day, is it worth getting the bone in? Yes. If you can find a roast with the bone, get it. If you can find a roast only without the bone, a boneless ribeye, and you can't find it anywhere else, then that's okay too. So now what I'm going to show you is what I like to do if I get a prime rib with the bone in is I like to take the ribs off and then put them back on. Why? Well, let me show you first. If you look here, right, the butcher would have taken this onto the blade, onto the saw, and go, beep! He cut them here. Sometimes they'll cut them a little longer, okay? But either way, these are part of the ribs, okay? And there's no bone anywhere else. So what I like to do is you take your sharp chef's knife and right along this edge here, see? This is where all the bones meet, if you will, or they level off, they're flush here. Place your knife right there and angle it toward the bone, okay? Don't push it down or angle it downward or this way, because you're gonna go into the meat. So angle it toward the bone and then just start sawing, following, right? Following the shape of the bones, because they're curving this way, right? And then you can pull away as you go. And what I'm going to do is feel along here to see if I'm in the right spot. Just get your finger in there.
And you can take a look on the side. Okay, I'm almost there. And see, I'm just sort of cutting down here and I'm peeling away, and feeling my way down, okay? And I'm going to remove those ribs. Okay, so now we have what looks like this, okay? I am going to season the whole thing, season this side, put the bones back on, and tie them. That way the meat cooks on the bone, right? It's insulated, it's protected. The bones get roasted. This side in here, which normally doesn't get seasoned, gets seasoned. What I like to do is rub the whole thing with some oil, just any kind of oil. What you want to do is season it 12 to 24 hours in advance. And that allows the salt to penetrate the meat. It's not going to penetrate all the way to the center, but it will penetrate. And now this looks like quite a bit of salt that I'm putting on there, but you want to really generously salt your meat. And I'm using Diamond Kosher salt again, right? So it's nice and flaky. And the oil on the outside, since it's a bit dried or dried out, which is fine because that's what gives us a nice crust, the oil helps the seasoning adhere. Okay, I might maybe season that a little bit too. Okay, now I'm going to take some pepper. And I like freshly ground coarse black pepper on mine. And then I have a mixture of dried Italian seasoning. Now, you don't have to do this. There's so many different ways to do this roast. You can actually just do the salt and pepper. You can make a rub with butter and garlic and herbs. You can do all kinds of different seasonings. You can use fresh herbs. This is one of the rare occasions that I actually do prefer using dried herbs. And the reason for that is it's going to be in the oven for a while, and then we're going to kick it up at the end to like 450, 475, 500, somewhere in there. And I don't want all of those to burn. Put some black pepper. This side doesn't have any pepper. I'm going to pepper the board. Haven't you ever had well-seasoned wood before? This looks bizarre, doesn't it? Okay, now roll. Now it's all in the meat. Now on the sides, you can go ahead and sop up all the extra salt and pepper, okay, that you had on there. And if you want to put some more, you can put some more in here on the sides. And you'll notice also on this particular cut, this is the fat cap, okay? And obviously they've already trimmed the heck out of it at the store, so I don't really need to do anything. But sometimes when you do buy this piece, it'll have a really thick cap of fat on it. So you'll need to trim away some of that, otherwise it just gets too smoky and just too fatty. It's just too much fat. So now I'm going to take the herbs, and I've got about 2 tablespoons here. Put that there, and you just cover the whole thing. And now at this point, this is when you would ideally put it back in your fridge for 12 to 24 hours, uncovered. Don't cover it, okay? You want that dry, cold air. And now I have, well, I got 3 pieces of string. And I'm just going to tie it up so that it sits nicely on there. I'm going to go ahead and put this in the oven right away because I don't want to wait 12 to 24 hours to roast it, but I would recommend that's what you do because that's what I normally do, and it really does make a difference. But this is going to come out really good anyway. And when you're using twine or kitchen twine string, make sure it's 100% cotton. Don't use, something that's 80% cotton, 20% polyester, or some other synthetic material, whatever, because plastic doesn't really go well with prime rib. Take a sheet pan, and I'm using a kind of a bad-looking one, but that's okay because with all the oil, the fat that's going to be dripping off and everything else, it's you're gonna ruin the roasting pan anyway. So just take any old pan that you got. I go ahead and take a sturdy rack. It's not a cake cooling rack, but one of like a roasting rack because it's sturdier. And then go ahead and put my roast on there. That's it. I mean, this is the hardest part of the entire recipe. So at this point, it goes into the oven. I mean, that's it. So yeah, you can have that cocktail. Now, how are we gonna roast it? So many different ways to do this. I think it was Alton Brown that did it in like a terracotta pot upside down or something like that at one point. I don't know. I was kind of like, whoa. Reverse sear. What does that mean? Very fancy term. All it means is instead of starting at a high temperature and then going down, we're gonna start at a low temperature and go up. So I'm suggesting 250 degrees, about 25 minutes or so per pound until we get to a nice medium rare, which is 130 degrees, because you're still gonna have carryover heat. So this baby is going in the oven that I have preheated, middle rack. And then we'll say hello again in about 2.5, 3 hours, and we'll give it a check. In the meantime, we're gonna make Yorkshire pudding, Musso style. So, since we're going all British today, we have to make the Yorkshire pudding that goes with the rib of beef. A Yorkshire pudding is not what we would think of as a pudding, right? Like chocolate pudding or something like that you would scoop with a spoon, that type of thing. So, it's really a popover from what really amounts to a crepe batter. So isn't that fascinating? Okay, it's a pudding, but it's not a pudding. We're making an English pudding that's really a popover made from what amounts to crepe batter. I just think that's all kind of fascinating. So typically a Yorkshire pudding has flour, milk, sometimes water, sometimes not, egg, and salt. That's it. They look cool, and I know a lot of people love them, and I like them, but there's not a lot of flavor. So we're gonna kind of tweak it a little bit and do it my way. So I've got the flour, because you gotta have that. I have 2 teaspoons of Diamond Kosher salt. If you don't have Diamond Kosher salt and you're just using like normal salt, table salt, then, or sea salt, fine sea salt, then you can use a half to a full teaspoon. Don't use 2 teaspoons, that'll be like really salty. I've got a heaping 1/4 teaspoon of finely ground black pepper. Then I have a half teaspoon of garlic powder and a half teaspoon of onion powder, along with about a 1/4 cup-ish of freshly chopped chives and 2 tablespoons of freshly chopped sage, which, you know, this goes really well with the beef. That goes in there. Pretty easy. I have found that if you dump everything in there first, you can do it, but you have to end up really beating the heck out of it because you end up creating lumps. If you put the eggs in there first, it's kind of difficult to work with. Then you've got to put the milk in there and it's kind of going all over the bowl. So that's to say, I think putting the liquid in first, the milk, and the water. Now that milk can be 1%, 2%, or skim milk. Believe it or not, in this recipe, a lower fat content milk is better than a high fat. So don't use whole milk or half and half. As you can see, I'm whisking in one location while I'm turning the bowl. Really, in a way, I'm sort of mimicking a stationary mixer. Now at this point, I'm gonna add the eggs. And I'm gonna put in 1, 2, 3. Now I'm using extra large. You can use large. You can use medium. If you use medium, you're probably gonna have to use 1 extra egg. And now we're gonna use an egg white as opposed to 4 whole eggs. And this will help promote a bit of a higher, definitely crispier exterior to the Yorkshire pudding. Now you'll see it's pretty easy and quick to whisk the whites in. Important now to let that rest for at least an hour. You can go 2 hours, you can go overnight if you want. If you go overnight, obviously keep it in the refrigerator covered, and you can use it the next day. I have a muffin tin in the oven that has been preheating, both the oven and the tin at 425. No convection, just normal oven. And that's very important to preheat the pan. Preheating the pan helps give you that poof, that rise that you definitely want. And you need a little oil in each one. I've found that you really don't want a ton of oil. About a half teaspoon is, I know it doesn't sound like much, right? It's just enough. So really, you don't really need more than that. And you want to fill these between 1/2 and 2/3 full. You don't want to go too little because you won't get any rise. You don't want to go too much or too deep because you'll have too much batter in there and then you won't get a rise. So this is probably, oh, I might get 11. Oh, barely 11, come on. Can't even get 12? Oh well. And then that has to go immediately back into the oven. Do not open the door. You may turn on the light, do not open the door. I repeat, do not open the door. Now, a lot of people think horseradish. Ew, yuck, yuck. I don't want horseradish. That's gonna ruin the beef. Well, if you put it directly from a jar, or, sorry, I'm gonna offend some people, I know, I'm sorry. You take even the fresh one, I know, and you grate it yourself. You gotta really love horseradish. Now, I'm not a huge fan, but I am a huge fan of this recipe because it's very simple and it's very tasty, and I've made it for years, and people who try it say, oh, no, I don't have horseradish. Just try it, just try a little bit. I put it on there and like, oh, this is actually quite good. And then they don't mind it, and then they kind of like it. And then the next time they're like, are you gonna make the cream horseradish sauce? So I'm gonna show you a very quick version here. I've got a 1/2 cup of sour cream, full fat. Don't be using none of that, non-fat stuff. Just get the full fat. You can, if you want, use fresh horseradish, but I'm gonna use some jarred creamed horseradish, or prepared horseradish, I should say. And I'm using this brand because this is the brand my dad used to buy. Maybe, about 2 heaping tablespoons or so, 2 to 3, somewhere in there. I have some chopped red onion. You can use shallot if you want. I use red onion only because I like the color. Dump that in there. I have some fresh chopped parsley, some salt, pepper, and we're gonna whisk that together. And that's now the base. And the key to this is whisking this together and letting it sit. Key number 2 is folding whipped cream. Yes, there's no sugar in here, there's no vanilla, just plain old whipped cream. I've got it whipped to, soft peaks. And then fold that in. And that's it. We're just going to put it into a serving bowl. And now, that goes in the fridge. Oh, this smells so good. Look at that. Isn't that beautiful? Oh, it's beautiful, beautiful. I'm gonna go ahead and tent this with some aluminum foil. We're gonna let it sit for anywhere between a 1/2 hour and an hour. Let those juices redistribute and whatnot. And then we're gonna stick that guy back into a 450 to 500 degree oven for about 10 minutes, and that's gonna crisp the outside. And after that, we're almost, I know, just hold on, we're almost ready to serve. It's time, dun da da da. Wow. Ooh. Look at how nice and brown and crisp that got. Look. Ooh, nice, nice. Is that a gorgeous thing to look at or what? What I'm gonna do is cut off the string, because that's very chewy. And then I'm gonna take the bone off, right? Now, this is what I mean about having those bones. That's kind of hot. you just cut right down the center there. And who wouldn't want to chew on that? You can cut 1-inch thick slices, but I kind of like to do a 1/2-inch slice. Now, because this has been resting for anywhere between half an hour to an hour, when you put it in at 500 degrees to do the reverse sear and you take it out, there's no need to let it rest again. Make sure your carving knife is nice and sharp. But look at that. Look at that. Oh my God. Does this say celebration or festive or what? Right? I mean, you bring this to the table and everybody's going to be like, yay! And you're going to feel great. The Yorkshire pudding. Maybe just put them around. And then, you just pre-slice some of them, and then the rest you can slice afterwards, but you can or you can slice the whole thing too if you want. Is that a thing of beauty or what? Absolutely gorgeous. Okay, I'm gonna go right for the eye, as it's called. And I'm just gonna try it plain first. You know I'm gonna say it, right? You know I'm gonna say it. Damn, that's good. It really is. If you make this dish, you are going to be very pleased with yourself, and all of your guests are going to be very pleased with yourself. And I think you really got to make it. So please download that recipe, like, share, subscribe, and ring that bell. And let me know what you think if you make it. Start eating. Bon appetit.